I woke to my mother-in-law deciding I was already gone. It was somewhere past 2 in the morning. The room was that hospital kind of dark, half black and half the gray glow of a machine counting my heartbeats. My chest still ached from the scare that put me there. And through the fog of whatever they had dripped into my arm, I heard her voice, Delia, low and certain, the way she said everything. "He won't last the month," she told the night nurse. "I've already spoken to a realtor." I did not open my eyes. There was a phone on the tray table beside my bed. Ruth had left it there that afternoon, recording a voice memo so we could catch what the cardiologist said and play it back later. It was still running, a little red dot in the dark, patient as a spider. I heard Delia's chair creak as she leaned closer. Once he's gone, the house passes to Ruthie, and Ruthie does what her mother tells her. I lay still, tubes in my arm, a man they had already buried, and I let the phone listen, but I am getting ahead of myself. Let me back up 41 years. I am Wendell Corliss, 70 years old, retired, a road grader man from Ferris Hollow, Indiana, where the corn comes right up to the edge of town and everybody thinks family trouble stops politely at the front door. I ran heavy equipment for the county for 31 years. Graders mostly. A grader is a long yellow machine with a blade slung under its belly, and its whole job is to take something rough and make it smooth enough to drive on. I was good at it. I could shave a crown into a gravel road so the rain ran off both sides even. I could feel a soft spot in the shoulder through the seat of my pants before the tires ever found it. It is not glamorous work. Nobody writes songs about the man who fixes the road, but you would miss me the first winter I was gone. In 1985, I married Ruth Faircloth. I was 29. She was 27 and the prettiest thing that ever agreed to ride in a truck with mud on the floorboards. We bought a little house on Mercer Row that same spring. 2 bedrooms, a leaning porch, a kitchen you could barely turn around in. It cost more than we had and less than it was worth to us. That first winter, I built a table. Oak. I cut the legs myself and pegged the joints so it would never wobble. Not in 41 years, not in 100. Ruth sanded the top by hand until it felt like skin. We ate our first married supper at it with 2 mismatched plates and a candle stuck in a jar. "Whatever we build, Wen," she said that night, "we build so it holds." I have thought about that sentence more times than I can count. We paid for that house the slow way, the only way we had. A grader operator's wage is honest and it is not large. I brought it home in an envelope for the first 15 years, before the county went to direct deposit, and Ruth and I would sit at the oak table on the first of the month and lay the bills out like a hand of solitaire. House payment, light bill, a little into a coffee can for Beth's shoes. Whatever was left, in some months it was almost nothing, went against the principle. Because a neighbor had told me once that every extra dollar you throw at a mortgage is a dollar. The bank never gets to charge you rent on twice. It took us a long time. But somewhere in the middle of it, without any ceremony, the house stopped being the bank's and started being ours. I remember the day the last statement came marked paid in full. I did not tell a soul outside that kitchen. Ruth made a pie. We ate it at the table. That was the party. A man can own a thing outright and still be treated like he is borrowing his own chair. I learned that at the Faircloths table for 40 years. The Faircloths never came to that table if they could help it. They were the kind of family that measured a man by what was stitched on his shirt. Ruth's mother, Delia, had decided a long time ago that her daughter married down. And Ruth's brother, Grady, agreed with anything his mother decided, because agreeing was cheaper than working. I let them think it. A man does not have to argue with a wall. You just live on your side of it and keep your paint fresh. What none of them ever bothered to learn was what I did with all those quiet years. But that comes later. Contempt is a patient thing. It does not shout. It just waits, and it corrects you, and it seats you wrong. I could give you 40 years of small cuts. I will give you a few. There was an Easter, back when Beth was still small, at Delia's house across the county. A long table, ham, the good plates. When we came in, there was no chair for me. Delia looked up like it was a surprise, though nothing in that woman's house was ever a surprise. "Wendell, be a dear and grab one from the porch," she said. "You're handy." She said handy the way other people say cheap. I got the chair. I sat at the corner where the table leg is, where you have to keep your knees sideways. Grady watched me do it and grinned around a forkful of ham. "Ruthie could have had a doctor," he told the table, not for the first time. "She got a man who fills in potholes." Ruth's shoulders went up before the words even landed. She had a way of tightening just before her family hurt me, like she felt it coming through the floor. I loved her most in those seconds. I hated that she had to have them. I did not answer Grady. I buttered a roll. That is the thing about people who need you to be small. If you refuse to shrink, it confuses them. They mistake your calm for stupidity. Let them. There was a Thanksgiving, the year Beth turned 16. I had spent that whole fall rebuilding the brakes on Delia's car for nothing, because that is what you do for family, and because Ruth asked. At dinner, Delia stood to make her little speech of gratitude. She thanked the Lord. She thanked her late husband's memory. She thanked Grady for carving. She went all the way around that table and never once landed on the man who had crawled under her car on a cold Saturday so she could get to church safe. When she sat back down, she caught me noticing, and she smiled. "Oh, Wendell doesn't need thanking," she said. "He just likes to be useful." Useful, like a wrench. You thank a person. You reach for a tool. There was Beth's high school graduation, too. We threw the party in our own backyard, under a tent I borrowed off the county. Delia spent the whole afternoon telling the other guests that Ruth had done so much with so little, loud enough that the little was plainly me. I flipped burgers and said nothing and let my daughter have her day. A graduation is not the place to teach an old woman manners she decided long ago not to learn. I could go on. The Christmas, she gave Ruth a strand of pearls and gave me a pack of shop rags, wrapped as a joke everyone at the table was supposed to laugh at. The time Grady borrowed my good truck and brought it back with the tank empty and a fresh dent, and no apology, only a comment that I must know a guy who can bang that out cheap. None of it was a crime. That is the thing about this kind of cruelty. It never leaves a mark you can carry into a courtroom. It just files you down, a little at a time, and hopes you are too polite to notice you are getting smaller. The cuts got closer together after 2021. That was the year Delia sold her place 2 counties over and moved to Ferris Hollow to be near family. Near family meant near Ruth's kitchen. She started showing up on Tuesdays and staying through Thursday, rearranging the cabinets, deciding which church Ruth should go to, which doctor, which friends had gotten difficult. And Grady, 60 years old and between jobs the way some men are between breaths, started coming around too. He had money troubles. He always had money troubles. He would sit at my oak table, the one I built, and talk about the family's assets, like the house I paid for every month for 41 years was a pot the whole clan had thrown coins into. "That house is really the family's," he said once, easy as weather, "when the time comes." I watched his mother nod along. I watched Ruth not quite hear it, because she was at the stove, because she trusted her people the way you trust the ground. Small reactions tell the truth. I had spent a lifetime reading soft spots through the seat of a machine. I could read this too. I just did not yet know how deep it went. Now back to the hospital and the little red dot. I need you to understand it was an accident that the phone was recording, and then it was not. Ruth started the memo that afternoon, honest, to catch the cardiologist. She went home near midnight because I told her to, because she looked like a woman who had not slept, and because Delia offered to sit with me and Ruth was raised to say yes to her mother. So it was Delia in the chair when I surfaced. Delia and the night nurse, a young woman named Kayla, who could not have been 26. I kept my eyes shut. And my mother-in-law, thinking the man in the bed was already more or less furniture, said the quiet part in her regular voice. "He won't last the month," she said again, like she was ordering it. "The heart, at his age, we should be realistic." "Ma'am," Kayla said carefully, "his numbers are actually looking stronger tonight." Delia went right past her. "When it happens, the house goes to my daughter. Now Ruthie is soft. She will want to keep it for the memories." She said memories the way you'd say a stain. "So the thing to do is handle it now, while he's foggy. Get him to sign a power of attorney over to Ruthie. Then Ruthie signs to me. I've already spoken to a man about listing the property in the fall. I heard the phone, though I could not see it. Grady on speaker, tinny and eager. How much we thinking, he asked. Enough, Delia said. Enough to clear your situation and then some. Kayla shifted in the doorway. I felt her look at me. She said, gentle but firm, Ma'am, he can probably hear you. People under sedation hear more than families think. There was a small silence. Then Delia laughed, soft. Then he hears his family taking care of things. Isn't that right, Wendell? I did not so much as flutter an eyelid. I have graded a road in a hailstorm without flinching. I could lie still through this. So I lay there and I listened to my wife's mother arrange my death, like a woman planning a luncheon. What struck me was not the cruelty of it. I had known she was capable of cruelty for 40 years. What struck me was the confidence. She was so sure I could not hear, and so sure that if I could, it would not matter, because in her ledger I had never once counted. Kayla the nurse stayed in that doorway a while after Delia finally left. Then she came to my bedside and checked the line in my arm that did not need checking, and she leaned down close. Mr. Corliss, she whispered, I don't know if you're awake, but I heard all of that, and I wrote it down. The time and what was said. It's in your chart. She squeezed my shoulder quick, like she was not sure she was allowed. You rest, and when you're up to it, you talk to somebody who can help you. I did not answer her, but I have thought about that young woman many times since. She had every reason to mind her own business, to file it under family drama and move on to the next room. She chose instead to be a witness. The world runs on people like Kayla, the ones who write it down when it would be easier to look away. The next morning when they had gone, I found the memo saved on the phone. 41 minutes long. I looked at that number a while. 41 minutes, 41 years. I did not delete it. I did not feel the rage you might expect. What I felt was quieter and worse. I felt the benefit of the doubt die. For 40 years I had given Delia the benefit of the doubt, told myself she was old, she was raised hard, she loved Ruth in her way. That morning I stopped. Not with a bang, with a click. What she did with a whisper, a little red dot had done with the truth. They kept me another 5 days. Turned out my heart had a lot of road left in it. When I got home to Mercer Row, the first thing I did was sit down at the oak table with a cup of black coffee and think. The second thing I did was call Leon. Leon Tibbetts ran a grader on the same crew as me for 26 years. He is 71 now, all elbows and opinions, and he takes his coffee at the diner on 2nd Street every morning at 7, like the sun clocks, in behind him. I slid into the booth across from him, and I played him 10 seconds of the memo. Just 10. Delia's voice. Get him to sign while he's foggy. Leon set his cup down very slowly. He is not a man who sets things down slowly. Wendell, he said, that's your wife's mother. It is. You want to go over there and put the fear of God in that boy Grady. I thought about it, I said, and I had. For about a mile of the drive home, I had thought about exactly that. Then I remembered I was 70 and Grady was a coward, and a coward who gets shouted at just tells everyone he was threatened. But no, Leon studied me. No? If I shout, I'm the angry old man who married into money and lost his mind at the end. That's the story they'd tell. That's the story they need. I turned my cup on the table. I'm not going to give it to them. So what then? So I let the paper talk, I said. Ruth told me something once, the night we ate at that table for the first time. She said, whatever we build so it holds. I looked at my old friend. Leon, I built something 40 years ago that holds. I just never had to show anybody. Now I do. Leon sat with that. Then he nodded once, the way he used to nod when a job was going to be long but right. All right, he said. Let the paper talk, but you tell me when it does. I want to be close enough to hear it. I told him he could buy me pie after. He walked me out to the truck, stood in the diner lot with his hands in his pockets, the way he used to stand at the end of a long grade, looking back at the work. You remember Halloran's Road, he said, that washboard stretch out by the reservoir. Everybody wanted to just blade the top and call it done. You wouldn't. You said you had to fix what was under it, or it would come right back by spring. I remember. This is that, Leon said. Don't just blade the top, Wendell. Fix what's under it. He clapped my shoulder. Then let it hold. I drove home thinking that a man is lucky if he gets one friend in his life who understands him in the language of the work he did. I had gotten Leon. That is a wealthier thing than most of what the Faircloths ever counted. Patience is a strange kind of strength. People mistake it for weakness because it looks like doing nothing. But a man who can wait is a man who has already decided he is going to win. He is just being polite about the timing. The next week, I drove to an office I had not visited in a long time, on the second floor above the hardware store, where a lawyer named Naomi Prewitt keeps her practice. Elder law, mostly. Trusts, estates, the paperwork of getting old with your dignity in one piece. I had first sat in that office in 2009. Back then, a neighbor of ours, a retired title clerk, had leaned over the fence one evening and said, "Wendell, you own that house free and clear now. You want to make sure that when you're gone, it goes where you say, and nobody can jam it up." I had listened. I usually listened to people who worked 40 years at a quiet thing. So in 2009, I did the paperwork, and then I put it in a drawer, and then I lived my life for 17 years and never thought about it again. Naomi is 55 now, gray coming in at the front, reading glasses she keeps forgetting are on her head. She pulled my file. It was thick. She read it the way I read a road. "All right," she said. "Let me tell you what you have, because I don't think you remember, and I know your in-laws don't know." She laid it out on the desk like a hand of cards. In 2009, you placed the house into a revocable living trust. You are the trustee. That means, in plain words, the house is not owned by Wendell the man anymore. It is owned by the trust. You control the trust while you're alive and well. When you die, it does not go through probate, does not sit in a court for a year, does not become a thing anyone can fight over at a table. It passes immediately to the people named. And those are Ruth first, then after her, your daughter Beth, and then held in trust for your grandson Micah. She tapped the page. You also recorded a transfer on death deed as a belt and suspenders backup. And you signed a durable power of attorney naming Ruth in this office. Not Delia, not Grady. There is no version of these documents in which your mother-in-law has any standing at all. She has no more claim to that house than the man who delivers your mail. I sat with it. 41 years of payments turned into 3 pages that could not be argued with. "There's one more thing," Naomi said, and she looked at me over the glasses. "You mentioned a recording." I put the phone on her desk and played it, all 41 minutes. She listened without moving, a pen in her hand she never used. When it ended, she was quiet a moment. "That," she said, "is a woman describing, in her own voice, a plan to obtain a power of attorney from a sedated man in order to move his property to herself. That is called undue influence. It's called elder financial abuse. Any signature they got that way would be worth less than the ink. And the nurse who spoke up, if she charted what she heard, is a witness." "I don't want to send an old woman to jail," I said. "She's Ruth's mother. She's Micah's great-grandmother." Naomi took her glasses off. "Then don't. You don't have to destroy her to stop her. You have paper that already stopped her 17 years ago. All you have to do is show it to her, in a room, with witnesses, and let her understand that the thing she thought she was reaching for was never on the table." I thought about that word. Table. Delia had been pushing Ruth for 2 weeks to call a family meeting to settle things while your father is weak. She wanted a stage. She wanted the family gathered so the momentum of the whole clan would carry Ruth's hand to the pen. "Let her call her meeting," I told Naomi, "but we'll have it here, at your table, and I'll bring the deed." I did not set a trap. I want to be honest about that. I just stopped filling in the gaps in what they assumed. For 40 years they had assumed I was small, and I had let them, because it cost me nothing and it kept the peace. Now the assumption was going to cost them. That was their arithmetic, not mine. Those 2 weeks were their own kind of education. Delia did not know I had the recording, did not know I had been to Naomi's office, did not know anything at all had changed, so she kept working, right in front of me, the way she always had. She would call Ruth in the evenings, and I would hear my wife's side of it from the next room. "Mother, he seems fine." A pause. "Mother, the doctor said his heart is stronger." A longer pause, Ruth's voice getting smaller. I know you worry. She brought over a folder of her own once. Brochures for a place 2 counties away with a name like a golf resort, and photographs of smiling old people who were not there by choice. She left it on my oak table on purpose where I would see it. Just information, she said, for when the time comes. You don't want to be a burden to Ruthie. She said burden the way she said handy, another tool. Another thing you reach for instead of thank. Grady called the house twice, asking in his roundabout way whether I had thought about getting my affairs in order. I told him my affairs were in better order than he had ever managed his own, which was true, and which he took as an insult, which it partly was. I let all of it happen. I did not correct a single assumption. Every time Delia said, when the time comes, she was building the stage a little higher, and I let her. A person who is sure they are winning does not check the ground under their feet. She thought she was walking me toward a pen. She was walking herself toward a table with the deed already on it. Let them bring the pen. We gathered on a Thursday morning in the last week of June. Naomi's conference room has a long walnut table and a window that looks down on 2nd Street, and that morning the light came in, warm and ordinary, the way light does not know what a room is about to hold. Ruth sat beside me. She still did not fully know. I had told her only that I wanted the family together with a lawyer present to put things in order, and she had said yes, because that is a reasonable thing for a man who just had a heart scare to want. Our daughter Beth came, 40 years old and sharp-eyed, having driven 2 hours because something in my voice on the phone had told her to. Delia arrived in her good coat, though it was warm out because she dressed for what she thought was a coronation. Grady came behind her with a folder under his arm and the look of a man about to collect. Delia took the head of the table without being offered it. Of course she did. Well, she said, folding her hands warm as a knife in soup, I'm glad we're all being adults. Wendell, dear, you gave us such a fright. You're not well. It's time to let the family carry some of this weight for you. Grady slid his folder across the walnut. I took the liberty, he said. It's just a simple power of attorney. Ruthie signs, and then we can all stop worrying about the house and the bills and the... He waved a hand. The what-ifs. Ruth looked at the folder. She looked at me. I gave her the smallest shake of my head, and I watched her hand stop halfway. That was when Naomi opened her own folder. Before anyone signs anything, she said, pleasant, professional, I think the family should understand what's actually being discussed, because there seems to be a misunderstanding about who owns the house on Mercer Row. My daughter owns it, Delia said. Or will. It's her inheritance. No, ma'am, Naomi said. The house has not belonged to Wendell as an individual since 2009. It belongs to a trust. Here is the trust. She set it down. Here is the recorded deed. Here is the power of attorney Wendell signed 17 years ago, which names his wife and this firm, and which cannot be replaced by the document your son brought this morning, because Wendell is sitting right here, lucid, and has not asked to change anything. Silence started at Delia's end of the table and traveled down it. When Wendell passes, whenever that may be, and his numbers say it won't be soon, Naomi went on, the house goes to Ruth, then to Beth, then is held for Micah. There is no step in that chain where it passes to you, Mrs. Faircloth. Or to you, Mr. Faircloth. There never was. Since 2009, you have been planning to divide something that was never yours to touch. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Delia did what proud people do when the ground moves under them. She reached for control of the story. This is ridiculous, she said. Wendell put those papers together to cut this family out. That is manipulation. He turned my daughter against her own mother with lawyers. Ma'am, Naomi said evenly, he signed these documents in 2009, 17 years ago, before by your own account there was anything to turn anyone against. He did not do this to you. He did it for his wife and his grandson, a long time before you ever thought to reach for the house. Beth had been quiet the whole meeting, the way she gets quiet when she is doing arithmetic in her head. Now she spoke, and her voice was cold in a way I had never once heard from my daughter. Grandma, she said, You drove here this morning to take my dad's house while he was still weak from the hospital, and you brought Uncle Grady to help you. She looked at the folder still sitting in front of her uncle. I am going to remember this. I want to remember exactly who was at this table. Grady flinched. Delia did not. But her hands, folded so neatly at the head of the table, had begun to tremble, just slightly, and everyone in that bright, ordinary room could see it. I had not raised my voice. I had not raised anything. I set my own folder on the table, the original deed, the paper with 41 years standing behind it, and I let it answer for me. Grady's face had gone a color I do not have a good word for. You, he said to me, you recorded us, in the hospital. That's illegal. I looked at him a long moment. No, I said. You recorded yourselves. My phone just happened to be listening. Silence again. But the good kind this time. The kind that means the truth finally found a chair and sat down in it. Delia did not crumble the way villains do in stories. She was too proud for that. But something went out of her, some current she had run on her whole life, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked her 88 years. I was protecting this family, she said. Her voice had a wobble under the iron. Someone has to think ahead. Ruthie never could. Mother. Ruth said it very quietly, and the whole room turned. She was staring at her mother like a woman coming up out of deep water. You told me he wanted the facility. You sat in my kitchen and you told me Wendell had said he wanted to go into a home, that he asked you to help me be strong enough to do it. You told me that. Delia lifted her chin. I told you what needed to be true. He never said that. Ruth's hand found mine on the table and gripped it so hard it hurt, and I have never in my life been so glad to be hurt. 41 years, and you had me doubting him for a season. You made me look at my own husband and wonder. He is beneath us, Delia said, and there it was, out loud at last, the whole of it in 5 words. He always was. I did what mothers do. I could have said a great many things. I want you to know I had them ready. I had carried some of them for 40 years. I said none of them. Delia, I said, and I kept my voice level, the voice I would use to tell a young crewman he had set the blade too deep, not cruel, just true. You are Ruth's mother. You are Micah's great-grandmother. That does not change today, and I am not going to try to change it. She blinked because she had braced for a blow and gotten a sentence instead. Delia opened her mouth to argue the terms, because arguing was her native tongue. Then she looked around the table and found no ally in it. Not Grady, who was studying the grain of the wood. Not Beth, who was still watching her like a witness. Not Ruth, who had not let go of my hand. For the first time in the 40 years I had known her, Delia Faircloth had nothing to say. She closed her mouth. It was not surrender. She was too proud for surrender, but it was the sound of a woman realizing the room she had always run was no longer hers, and never had been, not really. It had only rented her the head of the table out of politeness. And politeness, it turns out, can be revoked. But some things do change, I said. You will not have a key to my house anymore. You will not sit in my kitchen and decide my wife's business. You will not speak for this family in any room where money is discussed, because you have shown me exactly what you do with that chair. When you can come to our table as a guest, glad to be asked, you will be welcome. Not as an owner. Not before. I turned to Grady. He would not meet my eyes. Grady, you owe some people money. I've known that a long time. If you ever want to sit down honestly and figure out how a man digs out of a hole with work instead of with his sister's house, my door is open. But you come with your hands empty and your head up, not with a folder. He did not answer. Cowards rarely have a reply ready. They only have accusations. Naomi gathered the papers. Grady's folder she slid back across the table to him, unsigned, and the small sound of it moving over the walnut was the loudest thing in the room. No police, no handcuffs, no ruin. I had the power to make that morning a great deal worse, and I chose not to use it. Accountability is not the same as destruction. You can stop a person cold and still let them keep their coat on and walk out under their own steam. I closed the door on Delia that day. I did it softly, and I kept it closed. Summer came on after that the way it does in Indiana, all at once and humid about it. Ruth and I did the thing you do when a storm passes over a house and leaves it standing. We looked at each other in the quiet, and remembered it was ours. She refinished the oak table, got down on her knees on the kitchen floor with sandpaper the way she had in 1985, and I told her to let me, and she told me my heart could sit in a chair and supervise, and I did, and it was the best afternoon I had had in a year. When she was done, the top felt like skin again. One evening, she set her hand over mine on that table and did the thing her mother never once did in 88 years. 41 years, she said, and I let her make me doubt you for a season. I'm sorry, Wen. I'm so sorry. You were raised to trust your mother, I said. That's not a sin. That's just a door somebody walked through and shouldn't have. You could have shouted at me in that lawyer's office. You could have shouted at all of us. I know. Why didn't you? I thought about how to say it. Because I didn't marry a woman so I could win against her, I said. I married her so we'd both win, or neither of us would. Shouting only makes one winner, and it's never really a winner. I turned my hand over and held hers. Whatever we build so it holds. You said that. I just kept the receipt. She laughed, and then she cried a little, and then we ate supper at the table I made, which had not wobbled once in 41 years, and was not going to start now. I deleted the recording that night. It had done its work. A thing like that, you do not keep it in your pocket to take out and hurt someone with later. That would make me a little like her. I would rather be a lot like the table. Grady, to his small credit, came around once in August. He sat across from me, hands empty, head not quite up, but trying. We did not fix him. You cannot fix a 60-year-old man in one August afternoon. But he asked me, honest for maybe the first time, how a fellow starts over, and I told him you start by finding one thing you can do well and doing it until people trust you with a second thing. He nodded like it was news. Maybe to him it was. The ordinary things came back, which is how you know a house has healed. Thursday coffee at the diner with Leon, who made me tell the whole conference room story twice and bought the pie both times. The dog, an old shepherd named Biscuit, taking up his spot in the sun on the porch. I never did get around to fixing the lean-in. Ruth humming in the kitchen, which she had stopped doing sometime in the last few years, and which I had not even noticed stopping until it started again. One night I caught her at the table with a shoebox of old photographs, the two of us young and broke and grinning in front of the leaning porch. She turned one around to show me. 1985, the table half built behind us, sawdust still on the floor. We didn't have anything, she said. We had the table, I said. We had the receipt. She laughed at that, our old joke now, and she put her head on my shoulder. We sat there a while in the kitchen. I had paid for one honest envelope at a time, in the house that would go to her, and then to Beth, and then hold a boy who liked to run a toy grader across the floor. There is a wealth that never shows up in anybody's ledger. We were sitting right in the middle of it. Delia we did not hear from for a long while. The chair we left open at the table stayed empty. We did not stop offering it. She simply did not come. And after a time I understood that this was her answer, and that her answer was allowed to be hers. There is a thing I have learned later than I should have. Some doors you leave open a crack, and the person on the other side never walks through. That is their choice. It is not your failure. You do not have to keep the door shut to keep your peace, and you do not have to burn the house down to be free of the people who were only ever measuring it. On a Saturday near the end of summer, Beth brought Mike out to Mercer Row. He is 7, all knees and questions. He crawled under the oak table with a little yellow toy grater I bought him, and he ran it back and forth across the floorboards, making the engine sound low in his throat, smoothing an imaginary road nobody else could see. I watched him from my chair. Ruth was at the stove. Beth was in the doorway. The empty seat was still empty, and I found I could look at it without it costing me anything. The smaller table felt like the whole world. It turned out it always had. I just spent too many years letting other people tell me it was small. Let me talk to you for a minute before I let you go. If you have ever been the quiet one at somebody else's family table, the one they seated wrong on purpose, the one they called handy when they meant less than, I want you to hear this from a man who lived it a long time. You are not small because someone needs you to be. What you build in the quiet still holds, whether or not they ever look at it. And the worst thing they can take from you is not the house or the chair. It is your certainty about the people who actually stayed. Do not let anyone teach you to doubt those people, not even someone who raised you. If this story meant something to you tonight, share it with somebody who needs to hear it, somebody who has been made to feel like furniture in their own life. And tell me in the comments about the one who stayed at your table, the one who never made you prove you belonged. I read them. They mean more to me than you know. Thanks for spending this time with me. And remember, build what holds, keep your word, and never let anyone, however old, however loud, teach you to doubt the ones who stayed.